Okay, welcome again to our reading of Acts of the Apostles. We're into chapter 14 and we're up to verse 19, and we'll hopefully finish off this chapter. So you remember at this stage Paul and Barnabas have been mistaken for the gods Zeus and Hermes, and the locals want to try to sacrifice to them. And Paul, of course, is horrified. He probably doesn't realise initially what's happening because they're speaking in this local dialect. But as soon as he twigs as to what's going on, he gives them this long speech we've had above there, written in quite good literary Greek, in fact, which is interesting there. And he now convinces them, having said these things with difficulty, he caused the crowds to cease so as not to sacrifice to them. Now, next, starting at 19 then, the Jews, ep-aelthan, again this is from epi, against, plus erchomai. Normally we get aelthon, we're getting a weak aorist ending here where it's normally a strong aorist. By this stage, the weak and strong aorist endings are varied a bit. Generally, Luke does use the correct form here, but here we're getting a weak aorist ending. So it's from epi plus erchomai. So the Jews from Antioch and Iconium came against them, and having persuaded, this is from Patho, the crowds, and lithasantes, aorist participle from lithasdo here, having stoned Paul, that is, they throw large rocks at him. Esuron, now this is from the verb suro, this is the imperfect. Suro can mean to sweep actually, but here it's probably the sense of they dragged. It's generally used in New Testament in the sense of to drag, but it also has the meaning of to sweep through. So they began to drag him, exotes polias, out of the city, dontes, thinking that him, tethneikenai. Now that is a perfect infinitive, so tethneikenai. You see in New Testament Greek apothenesko, and that's the word that is used also in classical Greek. It is a compound verb. It's from apo plus thenesko. Now even in classical Greek, thenesko is really a poetic form. However, the perfect infinitive from this is theneikenai, and that's become fossilized really, and without the apo. So this is really from apothenesko. They've just taken the root verb here, thenesko, connected with thanatos and so on, and this is the perfect infinitive, the kenai ending. So thinking that he was dead. Genitive absolute, but the disciples kuklosantes, making a circle, a kuklos, yeah, word cycle and so on, making a circle around him, anestas, having lifted him up, having stood him up, he went into the city. So we get genitive absolute, which is up to here. That's a separate clause here. So when the disciples made a circle around him, sorry, having stood up, I should have said, having stood up, he went, that is Paul, into the city. And on the following day, he went out with Barnabas into Derbe. So, although he was stoned, he can't have been too badly injured because he was able to get up and travel on the next day. And remember, elsewhere in his epistles he mentions that he was stoned, I think, perhaps several times, but this is one of the occasions of this. He seemed to be a character that caused a lot of grief wherever he went. And having proclaimed the gospel, we get another te here. He's quite fond of te. There's a connective here. And having proclaimed the gospel in that city, kai methetusantes. This is an interesting verb, methetuo. This is the aorist participle. It means to make disciples. Mathetes, of course, is a disciple. Methetuo is to make disciples. And Luke uses hikanos in the sense of many, even though it generally means sufficient. And having made many disciples, hupes strepsen, he turned back. That's the sense of the hupok here. This is from hupok strepho. He turned back into Lystra and into Iconium and into Antioch. And now this is epi plus stay aristo as the verb. So it's epi, compound verb, having strengthened the souls of the disciples and having encouraged, understand, them, emenein, from n plus meno, and the nu in the n becomes a mu before the other mu for the sake of euphony, good sound. So this is from m meno or n meno. So having exhorted, encouraged them to remain in the faith. And now this is slightly awkward here. We get a hoti, probably a hoti recitative here. But there's no verb of saying. We have to understand a verb of saying. So it's something like saying that, and then inverted commas here. So saying, it is necessary, inverted commas, it is necessary for you through many tribulations. So perhaps after much tribulation, it is necessary for you to enter into the kingdom of God. Close inverted commas. So this is reporting what he says, that you have to go through much suffering in order to enter into the kingdom of God. Keratones santes. Now this is an interesting word here. You can see the ker root of hand. The ton is connected with tano, to stretch. So this is literally stretching of hands, so raising of hands. And in earlier Greek it meant to vote, to raise your hand in the sense of elect by show of hands, by voting. However, it's very rare. It's only here and in 2 Corinthians 8:19 in the New Testament, and it has more the sense here of having appointed. It may possibly refer to the laying on of hands, with the tano, stretching out your hands upon somebody, but generally rendered here, having appointed for them presbyterus, elders, cat ecclesiam. This is distributive here, for each church, or at every church. So every little small Christian gathering. So having appointed for them elders for each church, and having prayed with fastings, neistea, with fasting, parathenta, they commended, that is Paul and Barnabas, they commended them to the Lord, into whom they had believed. Now that form there is in fact pluperfect. Normally a pluperfect has the reduplication plus another epsilon augment at the beginning. This is pluperfect, as you can see by the ending, but it's pluperfect without the initial epsilon, which you often get in... The pluperfect's fairly rare anyway in the New Testament, and you do get pluperfects without epsilon, commonly in Homer, for example. But it is a pluperfect form. So, in whom they had believed. Kaidielthontes, and passing through Pisidia, they came into Pamphylia. They came into Pamphylia, and having spoken in Perga the word, so having spoken the word in Pergae, they went down into Attalia. Now, Attalia was the chief port of Pamphylia, and katabino is often used of going down to a port or something, so they went down into Attalia. Kakathen is Kai plus Ekathen, so it's Kai, Eke, and there's that old ablative then. And from there, Apeplusan, from Apoplio, they sailed into Antioch. Hothen, from where, again it's that hot plus that then root, so from where, now this is a perfect, well, it's really pluperfect in English, but perfect passive form. It's formed by using the perfect participle plus the past tense of the verb to be. So it is, in fact, it's a periphrastic pluperfect. So from where they had been commended, literally handed over to, so commended or committed to the grace of God for the work which plerosan they had fulfilled. So from where they had been commended to the grace of God with regard to the work which they fulfilled. And paragenomenoi, and having arrived there and having gathered together the church, this is from an angelo, and it's imperfect, because you can see by the double lambda. So they began to relate. These imperfects, I like to translate them often as inceptive. They began to, or they were. So they were relating, or they began to relate Hossa as many things as God had done with them, perhaps among them or with them, and they related that anoixen, now that of course is from anoigo. Now this is a very, very funny verb, because it really was originally ana plus there was an old root oignumi, from which this oig survives, and it was a compound. But despite being a compound verb, even very early in Greek, they've forgotten that this is a compound verb, and they augment the alpha, as you can see here, rather than the oig. And of course you'll see examples of where they've got very confused and they've augmented this, and they often put a third augment in. They do crazy things with this poor verb. You get very odd forms, especially in the Septuagint. So this is from anoigo, to open. So, and that, they reported that he opened the thuran, the door of faith. Interesting expression. I don't think this occurs anywhere else in the New Testament, but you can look that up. The door of faith to the Gentiles. Dietribon, and they spent time not a little. Now this is very good Greek. It's got a technical term. It's called litotes, where you, instead of saying much, you say not little. And Greek loves to do this. This is very common in classical Greek, and you'll see it in the New Testament as well. So they spent a lot of time, literally not a little time, so a lot of time with the disciples. And that's the end of chapter 14.